That's the goal, right? I want to point this out. This is the goal of surveys and observational studies. The good news is we'll get to the songs tomorrow, so there'll be more options. And we'll look at that and let you re-vote. So this is where we'll end today in the next 20 minutes or so, is looking at experiments, okay? An experiment gathers data on the effect of one or more treatments. For example, what is something that could cause plants to grow more quickly?
Sunlight.
Sunlight. So could a researcher give some plants 0 hours of sunlight, some plants 3 hours, some 6, some 9, and some 12 hours per day?
No.
Yeah, just take it out of this one.
Right. You could have it in a potted plant. You could either put it outside or not put it outside. You could actually keep them inside and use different UV lights so they can manipulate those variables, right? That's what I mean by that, Key Anthony. And because we can manipulate variables, we're not actually going to just make a prediction about a population in an experiment. What we're trying to figure out is a relationship between cause and effect. That's a big deal with experiments. So we're going to have treatments, right? Experimental conditions on the characteristic of interest. Members of a sample in experiments are known as experimental units, and they are randomly assigned to a treatment group. Okay? So, can't remember if this comes up later, but go ahead and make this note that the goal is to establish cause and effect. Right? A quick little example here again would be hours of sunlight. Hours of sunlight on plants. That's my characteristic of interest, right? Or the effect on growth, right? So hours of sunlight on plants, effect on growth. There's my characteristic of interest, COI. What were the treatments I identified earlier? The manipulation of the variables. So, what were the treatments? What were the specific ones I said? So 0 hours,
3 hours.
3 hours. I think I went by threes.
Yeah, 9, 12.
6 hours, 9 hours, and 12 hours of sunlight per day. I will point this out, those treatments, would that be your independent or dependent variable? That's the independent. No, you're right. The independent variable is the variable that the researcher manipulates. That's what the treatment is. The treatment are the independent variables that the researcher manipulates. Okay. They go into a lot of detail about a placebo. I'm not going to stress about it. I'm going to go over it, but I'm going to tell you I'm not going to test you on it. The idea is that sometimes, right, so they're testing the effectiveness of a new asthma medication, and so they have a sample of 200 asthma patients. 100 of them receive a placebo treatment along with an inhaler. The other 100 received the new medication along with an inhaler. So why would you give some people a placebo? So a placebo, notice, is a treatment that is assumed to have no real effect. And so they received a placebo treatment. Maybe that means that there was actually no asthma medication in there, or maybe they just got the same medication they already had. Well, sometimes your brain has a psychological effect, and because you believe something to be true, it happens, right? And so the placebo is testing, is it actually the new medication, or is it just your brain thinking that you're getting the medication, right? As I said, we're not going to spend a ton of time on that because I want to focus more on experiments, but that's what a placebo is, right? It's something without an active ingredient, so we can test the effectiveness of that new medication. Okay, so we are still going to look at, so I've already given you an example with the hours of sunlight on plants, but here, use this experiment, right? Use this experiment. Identify the population, the sample, and the characteristic of interest. Identify what the treatments are, and what are some ways the researchers could choose a biased sample for this experiment. And so we'll talk about that in a second. And I think those are the only questions that I wanted y'all to look at here. Yeah. So answer questions. Did I skip 1 and 2?
They're 1 and 2 are on the last page.
Oh, thank you. I was like, what the heck? All right, so 3 through 5. Go ahead and answer those questions within your small groups. We'll take about 5, 6, 7 minutes to answer them.
Just talk about the population. 200 asthma patients. Okay, what if the population be 200 asthma patients? The 200 people probably the Oh, I'm talking about the population. Come on. Don't want her to go. Okay.
The population is
No, it literally says from a sample. It literally just says sample.
Yes.
Wait, what if the sample be the
That's an
200?
experiment. The experiment will be the placebo. The sample is the
Yeah, so that is the sample.
but like, you know, the placebo is actually.
But it's because I said, not for real.
Okay. They're like, what happened if the patients received a placebo? I'm talking about patients receiving a new medication. So the treatments would be the new medication, the monthly blood breathing test.
What's a characteristic?
New meds placebo with
It'll be 100 patients.
monthly blood breathing test.
He gotta watch this.
Now we're gonna answer five.
They're trying to see.
Already used it.
Well, I guess 100 patients that receive new medicine.
We're still on question 3.
Oh.
Which one? Yeah, the 100 patient sample would be 100 patients.
What in the treatment be like?
Make sure you
The
identify
treatments would be the new meds.
yeah, identify the population and sample, like make it clear that which one is which. You're good. I just want you to have those notes to study from later. What?
Affected is something medication. Yeah, see, it's like.
You have to see if it works, that's an experiment.
But the sample?
They made that illegal, though, so like, when she started running the GCH.
What?
She worked
Let
like.
me see.
What if the sample?
The sample is,
That way.
Wouldn't it be the
well, I
treatment?
mean, you're choosing a small, like, so the sample is smaller and the bigger population. So the sample would be.
Does it have to be there?
That do the same?
Yeah, I think so. Because I mean,
I'm not copying of it. But what if I do
the
population as well?
placebo is like,
Treatments in the experience.
This is for learning. I don't care if you copy it for learning.
It's a big idea.
I care if you copy when it comes to assessment.
Restart what you said.
Okay, so the placebo is the big idea.
If I have my book,
So
that's the
the placebo is being tested on characteristics, so that would be the sample, like the sample outline.
so it'd be the placebo, the two.
The 200 out, the 200 out.
So let me ask you this, the placebo, is that the small group, or is that the thing that's being tested?
That's the thing that's being tested.
What is that?
Right.
Asthma patients. What does that mean?
But so what was the
Characteristic of
term,
interest?
so we'll get to that, we'll talk about that as a whole, but my question right now is, the placebo, isn't that a variable?
What, the very, I thought that would be the testing thing, like, that, for example, it says experimental conditions, like the treatment and the experiment is experimental.
Right, the experimental condition. So what is being done to the sample to test the effectiveness of the new medication?
You're being tried out on new experiments.
So they either have the new medication or they have the placebo. So those are the things being tested on the patients.
So wouldn't that be the case?
Maybe. The thing is, I was talking about, what I'm trying to point out is the treatment would be the, that'd be part of it, right? Remember, the treatments are the independent variables. That's the thing that the researcher changes. What's the researcher changing? Either the new medication or the placebo to figure out what? How effective the new medication is. So they want information about the new medication. That would be your characteristic of
I've been
interest.
to observe the differences between.
It's not even really to observe the differences. The characteristic of interest is just the new medication. But they need the placebo to figure out how effective it is. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So, population. What is the big group that they're collecting data from? Does anybody want to push back on that, or do we all agree? Jackson.
All applications.
Do you want information about just those 200 or about all asthma patients? Oh.
Hey, he's smart.
We want to learn from that, right? All asthma patients. So the sample is what? Remember, the sample is who you actually got data from. The 200 patients in the experiment. The sample is who you are actually getting data from. So the 200 patients in the experiments, but we want to know about all asthma patients. That's my population. And what do we want to know about all asthma patients? What is that characteristic of interest?
The new medication?
The effectiveness of that new medication. Okay? So characteristic of interest is that effectiveness of new medication. And so what were the treatments? Remember, those are the independent variables manipulated by the researcher. What were the treatments that were applied to figure out the effectiveness of the new medication? The placebo and the new medication, right? 100 were given the new medication, 100 were given the placebo. So treatment 1, and I'm just labeling it this way, but treatment 1 is the new medication. Treatment 2 is what? the placebo. All right. So what are some ways the researchers could choose a biased sample for this experiment? Think about the last type of bias I talked about under the surveys.
They can make it like evil, not give the eating amount of.
Sorry, I have this notification for when we have 5 minutes. Continue.
Instead of giving out 100, give out like 150.
So interestingly enough, you can give out different amounts and it still wouldn't necessarily be biased because you would still have data from both groups. And as long as you look at percents and things like that and averages, then it wouldn't throw your data out of whack. That's a good thought. JC.
Like the researcher often collected this specific results from like female.
Okay, could females be different from males? Sure. So either all females or all males. I like that. Any other ideas, Anthony?
He gave everyone a placebo, or he gave everyone the medicine.
So if they only gave out one treatment, yeah, if you only have one treatment, do you know how effective that new treatment is? You have nothing to compare to, right? Only one treatment given.
They couldn't lie.
They could lie. Well, actually, when you give a placebo, you do lie.
Yeah, well, I think they passed a law where you can't do that anymore. My mom, she works at PCH, and she worked in the North Harbor section.
I think you still can because you have to be able to test new treatments,
Oh, okay.
but there has to be consent.
Yeah.
So you can't just tell someone you're definitely getting the right thing. You have to tell them ahead of time, we're doing this study, you may get a placebo or you may get the new treatment. So you can't hide that. Yeah. Yes, Emma.
What about age?
Age might be a factor, right? I would say this though, the biggest one, the last one, because we are running out of time. If you have volunteers, that would heavily bias your data, right? Remember I talked about that earlier, that volunteers will bias data. Now here's the thing though, can you just randomly select people and force them to do an experiment?
No.
Experiments regularly are biased, meaning they don't have representative samples. But remember, what's the goal of an experiment? Is to establish what? Cause and effect. The goal of an experiment is not to make a prediction about the population, it's about cause and effect. So it's actually okay to have biased samples in experiments. Hold on guys, we still got a couple minutes. I need to show you all a couple things.
Are we
All
doing
right.
a little survey?
Say again?
Are we doing a little survey?
We're not doing a survey to end. You're good. The last thing I want to point out is this term. Go ahead and highlight this term or box it. Confounding is the issue, okay? You want to establish cause and effect, but are there other variables that could play into whatever you're trying to study? Yes. Could someone's lifestyle affect how well that asthma treatment works?
Yes.
That would be a confounding variable. If we're talking about plants, what other factors are there besides sunlight? The amount of water they get. What else?
Fertilizer.
The soil, the fertilizer. So here's the thing. Confounding occurs when there are other possible reasons for the results to have occurred. And so we're not going to go into how to reduce that confounding, but that is something to be aware of. If we're trying to establish cause and effect, we have to be careful of other variables that could affect the results that we get, right? So confounding is an issue. Yes, sir? That's exactly why you need a placebo, right? You need a control group to compare against. That's why you do other things as well. All right, I need y'all to see this right here. This talk to talk. This is going to be your homework assignment. I want to show you one thing though. I'm going to give you an option, right? So read the directions. Directions here, only 4 questions so that you get practice. You'll probably need an extra sheet of paper to do this. But I'm going to let y'all decide. Ideally, because I need to see how well we're doing this, I would like it to be due tomorrow, but I also know that we have other things going on. Quick show of hands, can you get it done before tomorrow, or do we need to do it on Thursday? I would also point out you could probably finish this all during enrichment.
Yeah, I could probably do it.
You could get it, quick show of hands if you think you can get it done by tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, I'm off today.
Same.
Even with enrichment not happening? Okay, so it will be due on Thursday. That way you have 2 days to get done. But hey guys, I need y'all to do this because that means I'm going to push the understanding check to Friday. You need to have this done Thursday so that we can discuss and you can ask questions. All right? So when is this talk to talk on M572 due? Thursday. Tomorrow we're going to look at random selection. Great learning today. I felt like it was good discussions all the way around. That was definitely better active collaboration. Jackson, for getting something. Thank you, sir. Thank you all for putting the calculators up. I appreciate you.
I see, Pappy.
Why are you writing this?
Get some sleep. Listen, don't be You what? Have a good one.
Leah, do you have Campbell's here today?
I don't know, I'm going to
What?
I don't know how to talk to her.